I'm curious about the presence or absence of wall text and artist statements as a trend, Stephanie, curatorially now in many of the gallery exhibitions I've seen in Manila, compared to institutional, like museum exhibitions, where they still offer a lot of wall text. And that's my question to both of you. Do wall texts appear only in institutional exhibitions? Does it help educate viewers in gallery exhibitions? Because Anthony, that's how I met you, was the gallery exhibition of Fotomoto. So I want to read texts, wall texts and labels, because it gives me additional information after I've seen the work. But how do you both, each one of you, use it or not? And what would be the reasons why or why not?
Would you like to begin, Tony?
Ladies first.
Okay. I think that wall text is very important, and in my curatorial, the Sotheby's Institute in New York, it's actually practically a science where you have to distribute the wall text in a way that won't converge. You have to be able to control the flow of traffic. In galleries in the Philippines, some have wall text, some don't have wall text. It's extremely varied. During the pandemic, especially, there was born a new method of the QR code because nobody wanted to touch anything. And, galleries like Silverlands, you can read the catalog and the exhibition text if you click. You just put your camera on video, on photo mode, and photo mode. Hey, it's related to photography. You put your camera on photo mode and then you aim it at the QR code and then you get to read more about it. That is relatively recent. It came out during the pandemic. But I just realized, Tony, it's related to photography because you have to put your phone on camera mode to be able to read those QR codes.
Oo, kaya yun nga parang intersectional talaga yung. Ay, sige, go ahead. You first and then ako.
I think that's about it. Yeah. I just came from interviewing an artist, for example, in Sikihor, and I wrote her exhibition text, and that's going to be printed in the gallery wall at in the gallery in Dumaguete, which is called Mugna Gallery. Fotomoto had exhibition text, especially the special exhibitions. Each one had, we just printed it out and put it on pedestals. So yeah, I'm one of those who think that is extremely important in whatever mode. Tony?
Yung for me naman, I recently wrote something about it. 1/4 of the photography community believes that if you need to explain or put writings on a photograph, then that means that your image is not strong enough to convey what it wants to convey. So there's one part of the community of photography practice in the Philippines that believes you shouldn't put text. And if in case you put text, it should just be very
just the artwork.
So basically, actually, even the title, some photographers believe that you shouldn't put titles. There are communities, online communities, and my online exhibits. There are groups who would want their members to just submit a photo and there's no text, even the title. They wouldn't ask the title because for them, putting a title parang influences your reading of an image. The photographs, they believe, should be demonstrative in itself. Whatever you want to say, it should be there in the photograph. Okay, so that's one side of the Philippine context. Pero another side of the Philippine photography practice is that mostly in documentary and in fine arts, for documentary, practice, a caption is required because a photograph is supplementary to a news. Diba? So one of the great traditions of Philippine photography is the photo documentary practice. And for that tradition or for that thread of the practice, you don't need to explain a photograph, but you have to label it properly. Kadalasan ito mga practitioners nito, they quote John Berger kasi for John Berger, he was saying that the photograph and the text has a certain relationship that is they support each other. So for most of the training for photographers in the Philippines, they are taught to use captions, and then the captions also should be contextualized. For a newspaper, a caption could also just be a title, but it could also be a little bit exploratory or descriptive. Pero for sabihin natin photo books that is documentary, usually it's just the title and the author. So walang explanation on what it is. Okay, now we go to fine art naman. In the fine art practice in the Philippines, since one of your goals is for people to appreciate the work, and especially right now in the contemporary context of 2007 onwards, 2000 onwards, the text is parang a supportive articulation of the works. So and in a way sa practice ng photomoto, or for example silver lens, which I was part of before, we had to create monographs. And in the monographs, inclusive doon is the exhibition text, the explanation of the exhibit, but also an artist statement para yung perspective nung artist hindi parang untouched. You have the curatorial text, which is the point of view of the exhibition, the organizers of the exhibition, but you also have the artist statements wherein you let the artist speak about his or her work. So the question of how do I view text that supports an image, usually how I answer is depending on the context. If it's a gallery, which specifically Angela you were asking, I think it is required because the gallery system has the privilege or responsibility of articulating a work of art. So number one, because you need to historicize it. In the practice of photography in 2023, if you have an exhibit, the exhibition text historicizes the perspectives, the point of view, the tendencies, the motivations, all of these things cannot be fully explained in a photograph. Pero maliban pa doon is really to articulate that there's a certain framing to make it understandable and accessible for a viewer. Like for example, if you do conceptual art, parang there's 1,000 million ways of reading it, pero at least you will provide an access to it na hindi naman totally out of nowhere, humugot ka lang from the ether na ito yung ibig sabihin niyan. Parang organizers of an exhibit and the artist, at least those two perspectives should be articulated. Their perspective should be articulated. I think si AJ din mentioned for a critic, for example, art critics and even galleries are moving away to a value judgment of the work. What they're trying to do is provide an access to an artwork. So usually it's really based on context. So I think for the practice of the galleries, you have to provide an access to the photographs. Aside from the visual dimensions, you have the textual dimension. Yung iba nga parang meron pang artist talk, 'di ba? Para at least para mas mahimay pa siya lalo. So yun nga ba nasagot ko, no? Kasi yun yung problema ko as a teacher. I have to explain lang din in the sense that there are different framings to photography, lalo na we're living in a postmodernist world na in a way parang it puts a burden on a teacher or an educator or your curator that you have to parang there's a burden of explaining. Kaya ang challenge ngayon is parang how do you navigate of explaining but not necessarily becoming pedantic or parang you become parang nagiging dictatorial ka na on what you're saying. Parang hirap.
Yeah, I actually that's very, very interesting. Just last month, I was having a chat with Jerry Tan, who, he's the Philippine representative of the Venice Biennale. We were together in the drawing room and we were looking at these abstract paintings. And I asked him, Jerry, what do you think about these paintings? And he said, I'd rather not say anything because if I verbalize it, it will reduce my experience of seeing it. I said, oh, and then he said, and I actually don't write about my abstract paintings. I said, you don't make an artist statement on your abstract paintings? He goes, no, because if I verbalize it, it's going to heavily reduce. Not everything can be verbalized. He was trying to tell me. And Jerry himself is a curator. It made me think a lot, but it's related to what you were saying, Tony. Yeah, maybe some things should be written, but in Jerry's point of view, looking at this abstract painting, by talking about it, it really reduces his thoughts and experience in seeing these forms and colors. Angela. Oh, you're muted. Okay.
Well, yeah. That's so interesting, Stephanie, because it's bringing to my head how I would be reacting or trying to support the work that I put out there, okay, in a show, because I am an exhibiting artist, for example. At the same time, I'm an avid art lover and I love to visit exhibitions. And if I can't visit physically an exhibition, even looking at it online, I will look for the monographs. I will look for the website. I will look for the statements. I will look for interviews. That's how I absorb as much as I can because I couldn't make it physically. When you tell me about this abstract artist also being a curator and not willing to make statements, I can totally understand it. But he's only one kind of genre of art. There could be other artists, maybe like myself, that I actually do plan and use the titles, the captions as part of my overall exhibition or body of work, because I believe that text will add to my visuals. Not so much that saying, like what Anthony says, like, you don't get it because you're supposed to look at it and enjoy it. No, I believe that text and captions and titles and statements can really strengthen what I'm trying to do. So if I may posit or offer to you both that artists' intentions could always be paramount, because then it can lead you to whether or not the exhibition will require a curatorial statement, artist statement, and monograph, whatever. But that conversations with the artist's intention about their body of work is so crucial. And Stephanie, if I may, I've followed your curatorial practice in your work, and your writings are so good and so strong, and I feel so disappointed when I don't get to read it at the exhibition. I have to dig for it by going into the website of the gallery. You're making it harder for me to appreciate your hard work, your fine work in writing, in your curatorial vision, in your selection of the artist, in your presentation. Why would the gallery make it hard for a viewer or art fan? I was getting very cynical. I was simply saying, oh yeah, that's because the gallery already knows that it's pre-sold the entire exhibition to their collector base, and their collector base, can be told with a phone call what it's all about, or blah, blah, blah. So that's me.
I don't think that's more sinister than what it really is. So 99.9% of galleries have exhibition text. It's just in different formats.
Okay. I'm coming to Manila again for my next round of gallery visits and for art fair, and I'll be looking for them. Yep. But meanwhile, going back to Anthony, your responsibility as an educator, and you're also your expertise. Okay, I mean, you're making us passionate about photography again with this podcast. Is how to appreciate photography in the Philippines, contemporary photography in the Philippines now, which is great because you're opening up the discourse. When you just simply say that an image should stand on its own, again, I challenge you and say certain types of genres. The photojournalism or the street photography could use a caption because of maybe context, time, place. The fine art photography, which may go into more, personal visions or whatever, may not need it, may not even need a title. But I would still like both of you to help guide us, viewers, through the appreciation of the art that both of you, present and work so hard to present out there. That's all I'm saying.
That's part of the.
Go ahead.
Yeah, reason why Photomoto has gazillions of talks, because we at least we find it important, the public programming and discourse, which we feel is really lacking photography.
Yeah, it made it very strong show.
Medyo ironic ng konti nga kasi, for example, since Stephanie mentioned Photomoto, one of the strongest or loudest voices about not wanting his images explained is Ben. So Ben Molina. So Ben Molina is one of the exhibitors or featured artists in Photomoto. And I was having a conversation with him. I was saying na actually when you did your talk, you didn't say anything. Sabi niya, napansin mo rin. Kasi sabi ko, kasi parang I wrote about it na yun nga, the foolishness of trying to explain a photograph. But I was writing it in the perspective of Ben. So I don't necessarily ascribe, kasi I think I don't want din naman na makuha yung idea na I believe that you should or you shouldn't write anything. So as somewhere in the middle, in a way parang most of the time I try to put myself as an outsider. I treat myself as an outsider. Kaya photography chismis, in a way hindi mo siya makakawa na you're pro this, you're anti this. Kasi I'm intentionally trying to parang put myself parang as in the perspective of an outsider, that for example, if someone like Ben Molina would say that parang they were even parang joking about it, si Derek Soriano is also a photojournalist, na parang he was saying na parang ba't kailangan explain para ba yan sa ginabi ng uwi, kailangan magpaliwanag sa asawa, as in they were putting it na parang gano'n, na sarcastic and derisive, na nakakatawa, na hurtful for people who try to explain their work. So pero in a way, parang sige, if this is the case, that there's a certain part of the community that thinks that photographs shouldn't be explained, then I'll give them the floor. So that's why I wrote about them. Tapos siguro, you mentioned also, Angela, the street photographers. Actually, one of the groups, I mean two groups specifically, they're composed of a lot of street photographers. They're actually the group that is saying, no, don't put any caption. And it's interesting because for them, as mentioned by Steph, similar yung thinking nila kay Jerry, na once I say something about it, whether it be even kahit a title lang or putting, parang sabihin natin binondo. So yung binondo, parang that's neutral. That's a neutral word or a neutral statement, in the sense that you're not saying anything. You're just saying that this is the place where it was taken. For some street photographers, even that you shouldn't put, because for them, the form is the content. It's the experience itself. The word is extraneous. It's something that is so the image should be demonstrative of what they wanted to say, and the demonstration is not necessarily an explication of an idea, but an experience of a visual phenomena. Parang ganun siguro yung thinking nila, na parang even, for example, kasi that's all, I'm part of that. Parang minsan kati-kati ako, kahit can I even say lang yung yung title lang. No, kasi yun that's they chose to, because that's how they choose for their images to be consumed. And siguro parang to siguro to encapsulate lang din yung stand ko. I think the good the question of putting a text, regardless of the context, it points back to the agency that is has control of that image, in the sense that if that image is put in the context of a gallery, the power to put or not put a text is primarily dalawa yan. So the artist, if he decides na I don't want to make an artist statement, so he has that option. But the curator, if he said no, sige, I won't ask you to do an artist statement, but I need to put, kasi it's going to be consumed. So the goal of the gallery or me as a curator is to make a statement about this. So if that curator decides that I need to create text, then that's the agency of the curator or the curatorial body to put a text. So basically, parang ang nangyayari, the choices whether to put a text or not, it points back to a form of agency that affects or relates to the image. Na for example, even sa social media, let's say, even if an image is devoid of any textual content, if someone puts a label on it, that's his agency trying to impose a certain reading of that image based on that. Kasi even, for example, let's say the curator and the artist decided, even nagkaroon na ng even sabihin natin, Angela, in your case, sabihin natin, you explained, you had a curatorial text, you even had an artist talk, and then a reader and a viewer says, Angela, I don't think that I think your work means this. In a way, parang it's part of that postmodernist condition that yun yung pinag-usapan din namin kanina nung simula, na parang in a way, parang ngayon it's the death of the photographer, it's the death of the artist. I think Roland Barthes also wrote about that in ngayon sa situation from 1950s onwards, parang parang yung power ng artist, parang medyo namatay ang artist, in the sense that when you put a work out there, whether you're an author, a writer, a musician, any creative agent, once a product is out in the world, you've already gave a body to it. It becomes an entity in itself. Anyone can read it the way they want. Now, for example, parang you were talking about the Philippine flag, and then someone says na it's about patriarchy. Parang, wait lang, it's a Philippine flag, relax. No, because it's patriarchy. It's a symbol of colonization. Then we're perpetuating the idea of colonization up to 2023 because we're using the flag that was a response of the Aguinaldo government to the Spanish colonial government, and however they did not revolt. They actually accepted the parang ang dami, parang in a way, pero that's an extreme case. So yun. So I guess yun lang siguro. I always end up with parang a context, parang, so are we talking about it as an exhibition? Are we talking about it as a monograph? Are we talking about it in class? Oh, ba nasagot ko, no? Sorry, Angela. So
No.
Yeah.
It was very interesting to get your perspectives, because it becomes, I think, a collaborative project between the curator, the artist, the gallery, to decide on what the overall exhibition will or won't include. And I'm fine with that. It's just that I am so personally willing to work so hard to release my work into the public, knowing that it could be taken in so many different ways that I absolutely have no control over. And that's fine with me. But until then, I want to support my work with as much as I can, So thank you for the perspectives on from Anthony and from Stephanie.
That even puts a burden on remember Jess, he's advocating for visual literacy, as I am. Actually, that point puts a burden on the idea of visual literacy, because if that is the case, then what legitimizes visual literacy? If you say visual literacy, in a way, parang you're saying that there's parang a more valid way of reading an image. However, if pag merong isang pilosopo, not that pilosopo, someone na lang, if someone who is more progressive, even the political terms, if there's someone who is a little bit more progressive and then believes on the postmodernist ideals, he would say that, Jess, And Tony, what you're saying about visual literacy cannot be legitimized by any existing meta-narrative. You're trying to say that there's only one way, or at least sabi natin kahit na 10 ways of reading it, when in fact there's 1,000 ways of reading it. So parang that becomes parang a burden for advocates of visual literacy din. So that goes beyond artistic readings. So kaya ang hirap ng democracy talaga, pero it is what it is. So
yeah, there's also this this burden of navigating what the artist wants. I was just working with an artist who she did not want any statement at all. She wanted a poem because her work was very political, and I tried to convince her, but she just really wanted to put a poem. And in the end, I mean, I think the artist, it's her show, it's her say. So even in writing, we have to be very careful to never misquote the artist in a way. So there is a balance of what does the artist want? What is their intention? Am I gonna force something or no? Those many factors come into play. It's really tricky.
and I guess from both of you, I really like yung emphasis of given that we cannot legitimize any totalizing idea of what should and should not. If that is the case, the way out, or hindi naman the way out, the way that we navigate it is through conversations. Na parang, sige, let's talk about it. So, in a way, parang it's a give and take na, sige, if we're saying that there's 1,000 ways of reading it, for the two of us, as an artist and as a curator, or sabihin natin, in my case, as a estudyante ko, as a teacher and a student, then let's have this conversation. And at least from the 1,000 ways of reading it, then we narrow it down to two. Your perspective and my perspective. And at least it becomes productive. It doesn't need to be nebulous na parang we're talking about the flag and you're talking about feminism. Could be, diba? I mean, that's an option. I mean, it could be a trajectory of a conversation that the Philippine flag is a symbol of patriarchy. In a way, that's valid, diba? Pero yun nga, so in the case of that situation, that every voice is valid and everyone wants to be heard, then sige, let's have a conversation. And that's the point of this one, the counterpoints. So I think this is new rin, parang wala ko nakitang parang episode na ganito na parang, sige, you want to say something, you want to add or a commentary, then let's hear your thoughts. Okay, with that, galing ba ng ending ko? Galing na segue ko. So with that,